half-day session, and the session we have designed in terms of the to look for the sediment dynamics or the sediment erosion process. So the first part I will discuss about the stream power and its broader application, which start from sediment movement to the basin scale processes. And then in the second session, then we will focus on the so first part will be on the physical erosion, second will be the chemical erosion part, and what is the how the weathering process affect the dissolved load in the system, and then dissolved load further affect the water quality of this part. And then follow-up talk will be on the estimation of the weathering rate. And then the third talk will be on the estimation of the weathering rate, how to estimate those weathering rate, the chemical erosion process, and what are the controls, and how it is useful for that part. So these three sessions will be there, and then yeah, that's all. So today first I will talk about the stream power, and you had already gone through in some of the lectures about the role of area and slope relationship, which are derived from this basic concept, and you have discussed about the shear stress, stream power, unit stream power, all these values. So one by one I will go through this part, and then stop me wherever you would have any queries, and then we will discuss this part. So the aim of this thing is that the stream power actually give us a very useful indicator to talk at the different scales. And why is it important? We will come on this part. So that's why I have written this part. At a unified concept in the fluvial geomorphology, we can move across those scales and look forward for the processes in a fluvial system, in a landscape. So before that, in first four slides, I will give a brief outline about the earth surface process or geomorphology, how it is evolved, and then we will bring this basic concept or the fundamental concept of stream power. So, so all these things you know that so the geomorphology is there. In the earlier, it was a simple definition, a science of the scenery. You study the landforms, characteristics, genesis, and the interactions. And much more detailed things are the scale and the interaction of a scale. So you are looking for interaction of hill slope scale to floodplain to the whole landscapes. And it is a journey from landscape to the local to the landscape scale. So you are moving from grain size scale to hill slope to a landscape scale. All those things are there. So the major challenge nowadays is that there is a model to how to affect the cause-effect relationship to understand the science of the scenery. So whatever landscape we see, how can we model it there? And what is this challenge? Because if we look for the history and if you can visualize, thus the geomorphology or the earth surface science started with the landscape evolution model. Those are Davis and Planck's models are there, which has suggested that it is uplift and then erosion, and then you have the mature stage, old stage, all those things are there. So initially they come out with some models, but they were very simplistic, and then they were discarded, and then people have gone into the small scale things. People have gone, and that was in 60s, it was started with the system theory by the Chorley, and before that, from the early 90s, we have those large scale evolution landscape patterns were there, landscape models were there. So 60s people have gone and measured the values in the hill slope process, river process, coastal process, glacial process, and then you develop lots of, a good amount of understanding, a significant of the data has been generated, and that lead to the process understanding of the part. But in 90s, again, there was few set of papers come by Victor Baker, Stuart Lane, and they highlighted that whatever we are doing at the local scale, they are not good enough to work out at the landscape scale process. And this geomorphic science or the science of scenery has started with this landscape scale thing. We would like to understand our landscapes, so we have to do more about that part. And that's being this modern day challenge. I mean, still, this is a challenge that how can we interact those scales are there. And that's where I will highlight the role of stream power models are there. So what is the research challenge is that there is a model to cause-effect relationship to understand the science of the scenery. So need of a single transport laws, a mathematical statement derived from a physical principle or mechanics. So why do we need a single transport law? Because then we can able to interact with the scales part. I will go a bit more details on this part. Let's see that first, what are the basic concepts which is used to serve the Economy, and 60s, the whole geomorphology is about understanding the cause and effect relationship. The whole Earth surface science is there, and then we apply different proxies to understand this particular relationship. And earlier it was there using the Economy concept. So what was the Economy concept is that for a, so for a given amount of cause, you know that what kind of effect is there or what kind of landform may form. The cause may be a climate, tectonics, land use change, these human disturbances or the sea level changes, and we know that what kind of effect may happen on this part. And once these kind of understanding have developed using a smaller scale landforms, people have then thought that it is it's a linear relationship, and this linear relationship was able to tell about the Economy concepts are there. This concept of Economy was served well about the Earth system science, and all the small scale industries, all small scale studies were able to extrapolate the studies in the long term past, as also they have tried to work in the future. So we were able to understand the past, or we were, I will say, we were able to interpret the past processes from whatever we were able to see, because we were thinking the system is linear and equilibrium. These equilibrium systems are there. But so it was there, and with this thing, equilibrium concept, if you look, people have defined the equilibrium in a different ways, and these are the definition which in the Summerfield book you will find out some of these books are there. So in simple definition is that if we are standing near a river, and then if we see that what kind of processes or changes are happening at the decadal year time scale, then there may be flood event, there may be normal event. During flood time period, the river may get widened and become deeper. So there will be some set of changes will be there. On the y-axis, it's a geomorphic form. Here we can consider it as the channel width, maybe. So it will keep on changing, but then it will return back to its condition. So the system oscillates, but it remains near the equilibrium conditions. That's the simple definition they have suggested. But if it remain there for a longer time period, for 1,000 time periods, then this system also deteriorate, and then this erosion process will then reduce the channel slope, and then even though the system will keep on oscillating, but the system is moving toward the lower energy conditions. And this is the dynamic equilibrium condition was there to integrate the earlier evolution model like the Davis model and Planck's models, and to the process understanding. So there is a process going on, but the system is also evolving in the different time. So that was the two such definitions are there, which was help to understand the evolutions and the processes part. But this 70s was the time when Hume has given the idea of the threshold. He told the system doesn't oscillate in a simple way, actually it takes a jumps, and these are the thresholds are defined. So within the threshold, there will be set of equilibrium in the system, and if we are there within this part, we can apply the equilibrium concept, we can apply the linearity in the system, but if it crosses this part, then it may not be there. So he didn't use the word disequilibrium at the profile, but later on people have come out that the system actually in the geomorphic system, nonlinearity exists and the equilibrium actually doesn't exist. In 1990, there was a special volume of geomorphology, and the theme of this volume was, is it the end of equilibrium? And the idea was that whatever assumptions were made about the equilibrium condition, they don't valid in this part. And that's one is the threshold, and then many other things are there. Some of these things have been compiled by Jonathan Phillips in 2003 papers, where he talks about the sources of non-linearities. So we will not go in those details. I will keep the focus on stream power, and then see that how the stream power has helped to understand those particular major changes or the conceptual advancement in those things. There's another thing says about this geomorphic change in the time, and the Brenston has given these other ideas like lag and relaxation. Now most of you people know that this is the relaxation or the residence times are important. So very quickly we see this part. So what happens that if there is any change, it may be climate, it may be tectonics, and you have a landform, it may be river, with a flood plain. And because of this climate or tectonics, some changes has occurred, but it will take time by river to adjust those new conditions. That is called as a lag time. So nothing has changed, and after that river has started in season. So this is a relaxation time. River is still under this process, and then after a while, then this particular set is it is defined that now river has reached at the equilibrium condition with whatever changes that happen. So now you have the terraces which are now well defined with whatever uplift has happened in the system. So these three stages has people have defined in the thing, three things are there. One is called as the non-equilibrium, disequilibrium, and thus equilibrium profile. And these are again the older work, 1990s works are there. 1990s all this paper have come. So what they suggested that is that if the system is there in the lag time period, in this time period, and if we are analyzing a river system and we would like to interpret the climate and tectonics, you will not be able to do because system is there in the non-equilibrium form. It is not started responding to the system, so you cannot do this cause-effect relationship for the part. If the system is there in the relaxation time, which is they call is the disequilibrium form, that system will give you some information, but the information will be wrong. Because whatever in season has happened, it is not reciprocal to whatever uplift or climate change has happened. So your cause and effect relationship, you will get some data set, but again it will not be correct. It's only when the system will be there in the equilibrium conditions, you will be able to do this part. And now nowadays, this decade is lot more focus is that how to find out this landforms, how to find out the interaction between these part. It is not that easy to work out the cause and effect relationship, and that's why this system is non-linear. And when I was discussed this kind of thing with one of my physics colleagues, he told that all the natural systems are non-linear. It is only for our simplicity we had assumed that they are linear. And this linear thing was working ahead was a part, but if we have realized that the systems are non-linear, it means we are moving towards the better understanding of the systems. And then so these things are going on. But again, the same thing is suppose another change has happened. Now this change, which is I will say, suppose tectonic 2 event or climate change 2 events are there. Now this landform, it is there in equilibrium with the first event. It is not in response to this part. Yeah. So and so henceforth all these things are there. So many times we see the changes and then we see the effect, which are the landforms, and we try to interpret the causes, any external causes, but all these things are equally important are there. And to work it on those part, then the people are trying to work that what is the residence time in the system, because a geomorphic system responds through the erosion process, and it is the sediment wave which is moving. People try to quantify those parts are there. So once these processes are there, then you need some driving force in the system to work it out. So this is about the non-linearity. What is the complexity? I will highlight one more thing. Suppose if we have to predict that if there will be a climate change, what will be the future of Ganga plain or Ganga river basin? That will be provide a very complex scenario, because Ganga river basin is not a homogeneous entity. You have a number of tributaries, rivers from Nepal Himalaya, they are very different rivers from the western Himalayan part, or the rivers which are coming from the cratonic regions are there. So every tributary will respond in a different way. Every tributary will have its own lag time, will have its own relaxation time. It means that the response will be very different in the different places. So in overall, the response will be complex, and we cannot generalize the responses out there. One or two equations will not be sufficient to generalize the processes. So if I club both of these things are there, if we are working at the small scale and working at the small time zone, we can assume that system is linear and we can work it out. We can extrapolate in past and we can say, okay, these kind of things may happen in past. Or people are also trying to predict nowadays. The prediction is the new things which is going on in the thing. But if you extend the things, I have given the example of the Ganga plain, or if you extend a thing in past, where the system may have taken different jumps in terms of the thresholds and many other things, but here I will focus only one part, then again it will behave in non-linear way, and it is not easy to directly, whatever understanding you have made on the cause and effect, you can try to predict on these things. So to understand those part, we need a better process understanding, and process understanding needs to be done at the different scales. Long time back in 1956 itself, Shum and Lichi, they have given the causality and the scale and causality aspect. They have discussed this part. I think Journal of I think American Journal of Science paper. Missing the reference. But the main point was that at every scale, our causative parameters are they will be different, our processes will be different, our observations will be different, our methodology will be different. So it is not that if you are working on a river, then a person who is working on the sediment transport, a person who is working on the floodplain process, a person who is working on the alluvial plain, or person who is working on the whole landscape, they will have the same kind of observation because everything will be different. And so it is very important to classify those different scale. This is one such scale, and different people have classified the landscape in the different scales are there. One major things goes as the grain size scale, reach scale, and then basin or the landscape scales are there. Or people also use the word like landform scale, and the landform may be defined in a different way. A small channel bar may be a landform, and then a whole reach which have hundreds of channel bars may also be a landform. So it depends that, or the alluvial plain, which is much more bigger unit, is also landform. So landform scale, landscape scale, which is qualitative way people have defined. This is one such thing which is showing that, okay, from the, this upper side is showing the ecological zone, this is showing is the geomorphic zone, and different things are there. These terms are not that important, what things are there, that there the gradational things are there, and we have to realize those parts. The challenges is also there. These two I have put with respect to the river processes. So if we are working at this is a space time scale, and with the space, our time scale processes also changes. So if if your queries are there at the millennial time scale, and most of you are working on that time scale, you are looking forward the geomorphic response in terms of climate, tectonics, and base level change, then this nowadays the major challenge is to understand the nonlinearity and complexity in the relationship, how to work out on those things, and you have to put the data from the different space and then see that how it was behaving. Second thing which is there, if we are working in the modern day time scale, and some of you are working on this thing, then this whole thing is there, that what will be the future of river in reference to climate change. Anthropocene is already there. There are hundreds of papers on Anthropocene, and people are saying that everything is going to be different, the processes, the feedback, the interaction of different landforms. So all those things will then define. And so aim is that what is the relationship between hydrology, morphology, and ecology part, which will help to understand the river health management, and how to develop the prediction capability. Both things are there. Here you are trying to go back in the past to understand this nonlinear complex relationship. Here the aim is to move towards the future to understand the same complex and nonlinear relationship. But everything is that how better we can understand the present day system. So this is one such example of the past processes. We all know that this 10,000 year time period was the monsoon intensification time, and our rivers have responded differently. These are the work from the different authors, and the one work in the Marsandi River, which has suggested that because of the enhanced monsoon, first the river valley got incised because there was a high amount of the energy was there, but that has also released a good amount of sediment supply from the hill slope. So actually valley grade aggraded, and then again it has got incised, because by the time this vegetation has grown on the hill slope, that has stabilized the slope, sediment supply has reduced, and then it has gone down. So if you mark the simple curve for the river behavior, it will go like a non-linear pattern. It will not go. Whereas if we take some other river, this is a Yamuna river, and which has incised and create the different kind of terraces. This is the example of the Sabarmati River just behind this campus, and this incision has also been reported and worked out that it has happened in the 10,000 years back. Here the incision rate was more, here the incision rate was less, and here it was first aggradation and then incision. So same kind of effect is there, but there are the different kind of responses are there. That's just one set of example. There is another set of example from the central India, where the dry phase to wet phase, same event is there. Some of the places the river got incised, and some of the places got aggraded, because the sediment supply was controlled, and sediment supply was controlled by the land use land cover. And now it has been realized that the vegetation is a very important part. Recently, I mean 2 years back, there is a paper by Bodo Buchhagen on the Himalayan part, where he highlighted that using cosmogenic nuclide, if you have to understand the erosion process of the Himalaya, we have to bring the land use land cover. This, without that we cannot do, develop the understanding of the part. This is one such example from the central Indian part. So yes, in the past also there are the various examples where the same kind of effect has generated a different kind of impacts, or sorry, same kind of forcing has generated different kind of impacts. So how to work on this part? For that we have to go for the fluvial assess and to look forward for that what are the major constraints are there in terms of processes. So process are only two, aggregation and degradation are there, and in between we have the sediment transportation process there. This is the old time figure, figure, and which is suggested that this process are governed by the proportion of the sediment supply and then the grain size behavior, how much discharge is there and what kind of slope it is flowing, and it is the balance of these particular things will define that system will move toward the aggregation and degradation are there. And the same thing if we put in the different sort, that if it is the power of the flowing water, which is the stream power is different. So if the water is moving from one point to another point, its conversion of potential energy to kinetic energy gives that power, and the rate of energy of this power gives the force, and that will define the driving force, and that's all things are there. Resisting force, it is the sediment supply is defined as the resisting force, and the channel roughness is the extra thing. And one of the this hydraulic class you have seen that the Manning's N is the mostly used parameter for the roughness part is there. So it is the balance of these two which will define that what will happen in the part. If we can quantify these two parameters at different scales and at different time zone, we can develop the process understanding of part. So these things I will discuss with some of the concept may come somewhere, but the focus for those things will be remains on to introduce about the stream power, and then little bit we will discuss this part. So before moving this part, I will give a scenario. Suppose I will give one question. Pose one question is that suppose we all know that the Ganga basin is subsiding, and we also know that at many rivers along the Ganga river basin, the bank erosion is a very severe problem. There is lots of places where the erosion is happening. So what is the reason? I mean, one case we have the subsidence, and where we should have a much more deposition, and deposition dominated system should be there. But in the another case, we also have this erosion process which is dominated. So what is the cause for that? Any idea, any guess? So you got the question, subsidence should lead the deposition, but then many rivers are showing the erosional process. Erosion is very severe at many places. No, climate change is not limited. So climate change should be there for all the events, and then what happens if the impact of climate change there, then it should be visible on all the tributaries or all the rivers. And so what you are saying is that tributaries?
Tributary input from several tributaries which drain into the main Ganga channel. If you compare with Yamuna or some other rivers, there is less. Also, Ganga travels a very long distance.
So the erosion problem is not only limited to Ganga. There are smaller rivers in Bihar like the Buri Gandak, which is much smaller than the major tributaries of Ganga, and they have a severe erosion problems are there.
So then maybe you can imagine if you have, as we have the frontal thrust propagation, so there is a basement, a flexure at the south of the frontal belt. So I think they call, don't know what they call it. So maybe younger thrust propagating further, like Piedmont Falls.
But most of the erosion problems are not near mountain front; they are in the plains and in the alluvial river. Huh? Anthropogenic, some of the places are there, but a bigger answer. Yeah.
Thank you. One of the reasons I'm guessing could be that as you are having more and more sedimentation in the Ganga basin, it puts in a greater flux of material that travels below and pushes up the entire Himalayan range, which is one. The other reason is that localized deposition of the tributaries along the foothills that raises that part of the channel bed for those tributaries, and then you have down cutting of the Ganga itself, which creates the higher channel slope for the tributaries, maybe. That could be.
Not exactly, but you are close. I mean, so part of the answers are there. Any other things, and then I will say.
Lithology. So a lithological variation could may also explain.
But okay, it is easier to erode the soft sediment, but why not all the rivers? And then some of the parts are there, and the whole Ganga basin is siding. Any other guess?
Maybe the driving force, like stream power, might have increased. Maybe because of, I don't know.
Okay, but why? Why are you saying? So it is guess.
It's a I just guess.
So yeah, Priyank, can you? I mean, slightly things are coming. So the answer is that this question is wrong. So I'm putting the wrong question because I'm correlating the processes at two different scales. We cannot directly correlate these scales. Subsidence is a regional scale processes, and to understand the subsidence, we have to work on the isostasy. We have to work on the mass of the sediment, which is like kilometer of the sediments are there, and then we have to look for the crystal scale processes, regional tectonics. Whereas the erosion process, we have to look for the hydraulics, we have to look for steam power, we have to look for the local regional pattern, velocity profiles, and then the bank erosion, vegetation, riparian vegetation. So all those things will be there. So your observations, parameters, modeling approaches, everything will be different. So this question is wrong, and I have deliberately put it there that when you are working in this part, you should be very careful that when you are relating the processes or relating the landform, then are you working at the same scale, or are you going to relate at the different scales are there? So relating the process at a different scale itself put the things in the wrong perspective. So the question was itself wrong. Both the things are not related. But in the first slide, I told that this is the major challenge is there, and that's why it is a challenge, because now the aim is that how to relate this scale. And in the first 2 or 3 days, when you have seen those equations about the long profile evolution, and actually those equation also works toward the landscape evolution model. So when Professor Bodo Buchanan come and he will talk about the land lab class, discuss about the landscape evolution process, same equations will be there. But where from those equations have been generated? These equations have derived from the bed load sediment transport equation. So that's where the movement of the single grain actually defining how the landscape is evolving, and that's where the things are moving at this point. So when you are relating the processes, okay, and so now I will summarize all the things. It is not impossible to relate the process at the different scale, but you have to be careful and you have to define in a systematic way. You cannot directly pose the problems of different scales and then make a story of that part, because it will be a wrong story. So same thing is that, so I would like to highlight, and that's why we need some of the parameters, some of the driving force which we can use at the different scales. Because when we are crossing or moving across the scale, we need some help. And in the first slide, this Dietrich 2003 paper I have referred, and he was talking about that we need a transport laws, and which can work across the scale, and that's kind of things are needed. The steam power provide one such law at the fluvial system. We need such kind of laws in other systems like glacial, aeolian, and hill slope processes. All these things are there. So this journey I will take, and then let's see that how the things. Okay, this is the slide I should also discuss. So this is the 2008 paper. I think Nature or Science, I forget, and that's exactly they were saying that now the things are there. The major challenge is about this thing, how to relate the grain scale to the landscape scale, and that's where all the modeling things are moving in this part. So whatever doing there is a purpose to moving in this part, and to put it in a bigger framework, as I started earlier, that the evolution or the journey of the geomorphology started with the Davis landscape models. It has moved up with lots of quantitative, lots of observation, data, process understanding are there. Now the things in the last decade is moving in this scale, how this the movement of the individual grains, so all the equations which have been generated from the sediment transport, from the understanding of bar process, floodplain process, alluvial fan, and the tributary things are there, how it will then help us to understand this part. These are the things which are showing that so these particular circle, they are representing the residence time. So some of the places sediment get logged. Suppose sediment get deposited in a floodplain got in size, and now it is no more connected with the channel, erosion process less. So this sediment may remain here for 8,000, 10,000 years or back. Some of the places sediment may get locked for a few hundred years. Some of the sediments may log for a lesser period. And that will define the dynamics of the system. That will define how the whole landscape will evolve. And that's where then all the things will come, detachment limited, transport limited, which you have already done this part. So to support these things and this part, and now this major things is called as the geomorphic connectivity, which is now the one of the hottest area in geomorphology. There are not only papers, but there are number of issues of the journal Geomorphology, ESPL, and recently this. I keep missing some of the names are there. Total environment, journal of total environment. There the issues are there which have come on the connectivity. People are trying to connectivity. Recently, 2 years back, when we are attending this IAG meeting, International Association Geomorphology meeting, there was a full session on connectivity where one major committee of the European group. I mean, so across the countries, there is a big group who is working to quantify the connectivity aspects are there, because this is the major themes is there. If you have to understand the process, we have to understand the processes across the different scales, and that's where this connectivity needs to be understood. So this is a relatively new concept. It started coming only 15-20 years back, and now you have the hundreds of papers and number of volumes will be there. So with these things, we'll go this part that how the steam power can help you to understand this part. So in this the next 1 hour, I will only give you an introduction, and then you can pick up. And many of these talks which have been discussed in the earlier days and also in the following days, they will show that how those things you can club. So the steam power, you have already seen that whenever water is moving from point A to B, then what is the rate of potential energy? It will then define this power, but rivers are of the different lengths. So steam power actually defined for a unit length, and that's why the whole thing has been divided by length. Here mass has been broken down to volume into density, and this part. And if you then rearrange all these terms, you will get that steam power per unit length. It is a function of discharge and slope, volume per unit time, and the delta H by L, and that is what you were using. So this steam power per unit length, total steam power, these are the same terms, or simple steam power. So whenever you see these kind of terms, you will get. And this is the steam power for a unit length, but for a given length, this the cross section may be wider, it may be things. So it will define that how this steam power will be used in the system, and for that you have to, like in this case, you have to divide by the channel width, and that's what we get the steam power per unit area. The steam power per unit area and a steam power or a specific steam power, these are the same terms are there. And so whatever is there, that for the length we have divided by the channel width, we got these things at the. So this is the amount of steam power available at the cross section areas within a cross section. So this is a mathematical definition, but what is the difference in terms of processes? This part is there. This actually, this term or stream power gives that what is the power available in the system, because your slope has already been defined on the basis of geological characteristics, and then what amount of water is based on the climate scenarios. So for a river system which has been defined in a given climatic and geological condition, this is the available power in the system. But the width is not an independent parameter. Width is again governed by the discharge parameters are there. If you can look forward, mostly in the alluvial channels, there is something called the hydraulic relationship. So if you plot the discharge, plot the channel width with respect to discharge, you will get a power relationship in this part. So you can write W is equal to A Q to the power B. Same thing is there, you can plot the channel depth with respect to discharge, you will again get a power relationship, again some coefficient, I will write it A1 Q to the power B1. And in the hydraulic relationship, another things people then arrive for the velocity in discharge, this goes much more horizontal, but again it is defined by, so the power relationship I will write as a, so I will write A1 B1 here, maybe A2 B2 here, and A3 B3. Q to the power B3 is there. And if we can club all these things, I mean if you can multiply W into width into velocity you will say that width into depth is nothing but the cross section area in a rectangular channel. So if this is your width and this is your depth, so this is the cross section area, and area into velocity is nothing but the Q. So it means width into depth and velocity is equal to Q. And if I put all these numbers, values are there. So A1 Q to the power B1 into A2 Q to the power B2 into A3 Q to the power B3 is equal to Q. Right? So if so everywhere we have Q, it means A1, A2, A3 and Q to the power B1 plus B2 plus B3, because these are the power B1, we have the Q, and which is the power 1. So it means A1, A2, A3 is equal to 1 and B1 plus B2 plus B3 is equal to 1. This relationship also helps a lot to understand the dynamics of the system. So what is happening that this is the shape parameters and then this is the velocity parameters. All these things are not independent, they are governed by the discharge, and their relationship is governed by this. So what this relationship is suggest? One means it is the 100%. So if you change if you make any changes in the hydrological property, or if you make a change in the discharge, that all the changes is taken care by the changes in channel shape, which is width and depth and velocity. 100% of the changes in discharge may be taken care by this. So it means that this discharge and width are not independent parameters are there, or in other case, what happens in this case that we change the discharge values, then the width value will also vary in these cases. Some of the cases the A1 width may be very, so in some cases A1 may be bigger than A2, and in some cases A1 may be less than A2 is there, and A3, which is the velocity profile, sorry, B3 is there, which is the power of the velocity, it remains close to 0.1. So 90% of the variation actually governed by the channel shape variations are there. So in fact, I should have written B1, B2. So if the power of the width is more than the power of the depth, it means that if we increase the discharge, then the channel will increase its width. And if the power of depth is meet, it means the bank erosion will be more in the system. Or in other case, when the power of the depth is more than the power of the width, it means when the discharge will increase, then more and more bad erosion will happen, incision will happen in the system. So we will get, suppose we have a normal system like this, it may become this kind of system, that kind of system, that will depend on what kind of hydraulic geometries are there. And if become that kind of system, then the erosion or process will be more, because your omega is small omega, which is the steam power per unit length, or specific steam power is more. Here the omega values will be less. So less geomorphic work will be done, and here the more geomorphic work will be done. So again, summarize this slide, and the thing is that whatever power is available, the computation of that power is not sufficient. You have to estimate how this power is going to utilize, and for this the channel width is a very important factor.
So how to quantify this power along the depth and power along the width in a natural scenario?
So in a
Is it
natural
possible
scenario,
to quantify this one?
Natural scenario, you can take the data. It depends that you are going in the field, then measuring the data of slope, width and discharge at different point, you can get this profile values are there. Nowadays people are also using on the digital data set is there, where some of the data sets are known and some of the data sets are interpolated between this part to get the profile. Some of these things I will show in the later cases. So it's all on the availability of data, and then how well you play with the data set. Play with the data means you do the interpolation. But before generation of this part, it's important that this second power actually shows that it is a utilization of the power. So the action or geomorphic work actually governed by the specific steam power. This is the power available in the system, and this is the power utilization. And another thing is in this discussion, there was another terms which were used significantly in the evolution profile model is the shear stress, which is governed by the gamma ds, where d is the depth, or gamma RHSS is there, hydraulic radius, is also used. And but what happens in this normal rectangle channel, especially in the river system, in the natural river system, the width used to be significantly higher than the width. So we take the RH or the hydraulic radius, which is area by perimeter. So area is width into depth, and perimeter is width plus twice of the depth. But width is generally 1 or 2 kilometer, depth is 1 or 2 meter. So that's why you can ignore this W plus 2D, the D part in this case, and W will be cancelled out. So RH is proportional, is equivalent to the D values are there. So both this equation you will see in the literature for the shear stress. Gamma is the unit weight of the water. This is same thing is there. It is a product of density and the gravity force. And then, so gamma is there, but D and RH is the same thing, and slope is the important part. So shear stress is that, and if we, so the thing is that, is it related with each other or not? So if we put the omega, which is shown as gamma Qs by W, and this discharge I have broken down into its S component. So area, which is width into depth into velocity, and into S divided by the width. Width and width will be cancelled out. So whatever is left is gamma, D and S, which is nothing but the shear stress, and then the velocity. So these parameters are also related, and that's why in the steam power model you have seen that there was a different, in some of the places when Jerome was discussing, some of the places the steam power was coming, some of the places shear stress was coming, but there the similar things are there. There's minor differences there that I will discuss, but they are related. They are not same, but they are related with each other. And what are the differences there? This is the energy. What is energy? It is the energy is it is a thing needed for geomorphic work. So if the more energy will be there, and the power means it is the rate of energy expenditure. If the power will be more, then more and more work will be done. Stress is nothing but the force per unit area. So this is only the force which is acting on the particle. There's no work is there. In the school, we have seen that work is equal to force into displacement. If whatever force you apply, suppose in the wall, if the displacement is 0, then work is 0. So shear stress is not a very good representation of the work. Work means here we are interested in the geomorphic work in the system. So that's where the velocity comes in the picture. Yeah. So if you are modeling the processes, if you are interested to look for the sediment transport process, then we will go for this part, and then we use the velocity, because then only we can look for the work. Otherwise, if you are only looking for the shear stress parameter, it's only a force which is acting at a unit area. It is not give you the idea about the geomorphic work. The work, or which I add the prefix as a geomorphic part. So that is the one thing, and one more thing I wanted to discuss. And in many of the literature you will see that the shear stress has been used, because when you are working in the past, you are working in a very limited data set. You don't have the velocity of the paleo flow. You don't have the discharge velocities are there. So you are working of the area as a proxy, and then work K as a, you take the K as a constant and then put all the uncertainties in the K, and work with the area and slope to look forward to some of the relationships are there. So that's why the shear stress is useful to work it out. Second thing is a scale. Shear stress, if I draw a cross section, in a natural river system, you will get the cross section like this. You will never get a very flat rectangular cross section. So in this kind of cross section, this value of the total steam power, it is the average steam power for a given length, and it has all the variability for the different cross section. This steam power or per unit area, or the specific steam power, is the average value for the given cross sections. But when you are working on incision, you are interested that what is the rate of incision at a given point. So, and the rate of incision or the shear stress will be different at different points. So if I call as tau 1 and tau 2 or tau 3, it will be different because depths are different at different points. And also the velocity profile will be different, because your roughness are there. If you draw a velocity profile in the cross section, it will go like this. So velocity control will go like this. So wherever the depth will be more, you will get the maximum value of the velocities are there. It means most of the geomorphic work will also be done here, because your geomorphic work is governed by the velocity and profile. That's why in the modeling approaches, you will see the shear stress has been used in most of the way. Yeah, not all the times, but it depends on the scale or whatever our research question is there, at what scale we are addressing that research question, and whatever the data sets are limited. And all these things are then, discharge, slope, and width. As I told, it is a function of discharge itself. And if I write the equation of shear stress, which is gamma ds, and di also say that it is a function of discharge. So everything, discharge, width, and these things, and this capital omega is the gamma qs. So everything you can see that all the driving forces can be converged into a function of discharge and slope. And that's how this empirical equations is there, which is Ka to the power m and S to the power n. Discharge is further used as a proxy of area, and those things are there. M and S are there. It used to vary, depends on the process, and at that scale we are working. So in the last, in the first few days, you have extensively used these equations, and that's how all these things are related. Now I will move further. I have very less time, I think. But rather than finishing the thing, or if anything is very simple, you can suggest. I will go faster in this. First thing, these things are then clear. We have this three expression of driving force: stream power, unit stream power, and shear stress. They can work at the different scales, work for the different purpose, different research questions. They are related, but they are not same, and depends on the the data availabilities are there. So I will highlight one of the applications of some of those tools. First is the movement of the individual grains, and the process starts from the movement of the individual grains. This is the bed load sediment transport, which is the fundamental process for the river incision, and that's how the whole landscape evolution process are based on this thing. And so whenever a grain is there, two forces act on the grain. One is the simple force, which is the drag force, which is acting by the action of the water. Second is the lift force is called because of the height difference, the amount of the cross section available over the grain is less. And now our discharge is area into velocity. It means, maybe I will remove. So discharge is your area, I will call it A1 V1 at one point may be equal to A2 V2. So when your area will change, or the cross section area for the water flow will be less, then the velocity will increase. And when the velocity increases, then from the Bernoulli's theorem we know that the pressure will be less in the system. So what happened for the larger grain, when the water started flowing over the grains, the velocity will be more of the water, and because of the high velocity, there will be less pressure over the grains. That's caused the lift force in this part. So there is a lift force and drag force, both of these. The grain start moving in this direction, which is called as the fluid force. And this fluid force brings the major type of movement of the grain, which is called the saltating grain. So grains used to jump, and once they jump, then they provide an impulse force to another grain, and the other grains also jump. So this is a saltating mode, which is a very common things are there. And to understand this part, and the other things are the sliding and the rotating. And sliding and rotating is where the drag force is much more important. So rolling is there, and the sliding part is there. So to estimate this part, modeling of the bedrock segment is the most complex thing. And when the hydraulic lecture was there by Professor Pranab Mahapatra, he highlighted that this is an open research question and lots of work is needed. But people have, in nature science or in the geological science, we always get the way to work it out, and these are the empirical equations which are used. So this IB is the rate of bed load sediment transportation, and then they find out that it is proportional to the omega, which is the unit stream power, and EB, which is defined as the efficiency of the system. So efficiency, they have further defined that how well is the hydraulic radius of this part, and then how well is the roughness of the system. So at this moment, I will not go in much of the details, but only to see that this rate of the bed load sediment transport, it is not only a function of omega, but also something called omega C, and also D is the depth, and capital D is the grain size of the parameters are there. Ultimately, it will define. So again, the same thing. If we have a different kind of the cross section are there, then in this part, so in this cross section, more and more water will be contact with the surface of the this channel, so the roughness will be more. In this case, less amount of water will be in contact. Suppose the water is there, then this amount of water is there free, so the efficiency will be more in a simple way. Second thing is, this is the most difficult thing, which is the omega c, and why there is a need to bring the omega c values are there. And what they find out that in the empirical equation, it is easier, you perform an experiment and whatever observations are coming, then you plot it, you get equation. So the equations is coming, if you put the IB here and omega values here, they find out that it come like this, the plot. And this was the boundary, above this particular lines or whatever we call as the boundary, the relationship between IB and omega was linear, but in this part it is bringing the non-linearity in the system, which is bringing the problem. And further details, they find out that this change in omega values is needed, because once the grain is stationary, you need a higher values of the stream power. And once the grain, so this is a stationary grain, these are the moving grains are there. When all the grains will start moving, then the rate of bed load sediment transport will be proportional to the omega. But before this part, it is the sediment movement process are there. And sediment movement, so to whatever the steam power or unit steam power needed to transport the sediment, that is called as the critical value or known as the omega c. Same thing is used as the tau c values are there. You will not see capital omega c is there because capital omega is a reach scale processes, and here you are talking about the very grain scale processes are there. So critical values are important. Critical values is the value of steam power which is needed to transport a grain. So when they plotted the value of IB and on the x-axis omega minus omega c, they get a linear plot. And that's why in most of the bed load sediment transport equations, you will see that these two things will be there, omega minus omega c or tau minus tau c. It depends that whatever parameter they are using. Without critical values, those relationships will have lots of complexities in the system, and you will see all this kind of relationship. They got a very well defined this equation. These are the number of rivers are there. They have plotted and got the equations. So this is the first set of things are there that people have used this for. And again in the hydraulic equation, this Mayer-Peter formula was used. I think Professor Jerome has also shown the Mayer-Peter formula. All those things has all these functions are there, and then the dimensionless number was coming. So this omega c is there, now the critical value. So omega is easier, omega tau is easier to identify. You can go in the field or you can set up the instrument, you can measure the discharge, you can measure the width, you can measure the depth, you can measure the slope, and then you will get the value. Omega c is a problem because omega c will be different for the different grains, and river is not characterized by the only one grain type. So now the question is that if you plot this thing, it will come as a normal curve, or if you plot in the log normal plot, it will come on the distribution, but it will have a distribution. Many times we work with the D50. Omega c is defined for the D50, but many times it is not that sufficient in the cases. And I will highlight this, some of the relations which are there. So that was the bed load sediment transport. It is a rate that what is the total volume of the sediment which is passing in a unit time period. And why is it important now? Because in the whole in-season process, this IB is the important thing is there. In the Scaler and Dietrich work or the earlier Flume experiment also you have seen, the aim is that how fast or how much of the sediment is moving at the unit rate, because this movement of the sediment provides the abrasion rate in the system, and abrasion brings the in-season of the profile. So if the water is moving and there is no sediment in the system, even though you will have uplift, you will not have in-season at that fast because there is not much. So this bed load is the tool for the in-season because of the abrasion process. And if this bed load erosion will be more, or if the rate will be more, then the in-season rate will be more, and that's why once the in-season starts, then it keep on going in a normal way. In-season doesn't go in other ways. You will get a very deep valleys are there. In higher Himalaya, you have valleys which are 2 kilometer deeper levels are there, because once the valley become narrower, then this IB will be much more because omega value will increase in the system, and yeah, that's a positive feedback system forms. And so that's why it is important. If the sedimentation rate is much higher, then it stops the incision process because it provides a sediment cover to that part. Second thing is that people have also looked forward the movement of the individual grains. This is one such paper, and there are number of experiment has been done, and they have took a number of samples and put magnetic particles within this part, and then later on it was traced that how long this particular grain has been traveled. And again, this is length is the mean distance of the class movement. So the movement of this part is also related with the omega and omega c values are there, and there are number of these equations are there. The major complexity I will highlight, and then I will move to the next scale. It is the omega c values are there. Okay, this column slide. So on the x-axis, these are the grain sizes are there, and these are the different rivers, and you work at different people who have worked in or. So you can see that for a so if I take one particular stream power, then the critical value will be different for the different grain size. And in the river, we have a mixture of the grain sizes are there. Same thing is there in the different studies. They have find out that there is a significant amount of differences there. Even if we take a single grain size and if we move upward, then we can see that in one cases the critical value will be close to 10 watt per meter square. In another case, it may be close to 100 watt per meter square. So omega c values actually increases a lot, and it is a function of grain size value. You cannot do much with that part, and that brings a lots of uncertainties in the system, and that is where the k values are there. People put all those things, and in the last day, I think he discussed about that. What is the role of grain size and the role of grain size in landscape evolution models? Because role of grain size is there to estimate this omega c values are there. So the small things are there which are related to sediment motion, but they are contributing towards your understanding of the landscape evolution model. Landscape evolution models, people are making it improve, make it improved because they are the understanding coming from the grain size. Yeah.
Sir, I just want to ask, is it possible to have vertical erosion in absence of upliftment?
Yes, climate is one of the things. The thing is that you have to increase the driving force in the system. So driving force, which is a function of Q and S, or if we take the incision law, we can put M and S values are there. So uplift plays with the slope values in the system. But if there is no uplift, means there is no change in the slope, but discharge can change.
In that case, we should have lateral erosion in spite of vertical erosion.
No, it is not necessary. So it all depends that if the erosion or the discharge has increased in the system, then it depends in the hydraulic geometry or in the hydroclass. You can remember this the direction of the velocity Vx, Vy, Vz. He had mentioned that during flood time you will also have the y component which will be dominated, but x component always remain dominated. So x components brings you the bad erosion because in a river valley, your water is flowing in this direction, so it will keep on abrasion here. When your y component of the velocity will increase, then it will start attacking the bank. You will have those erosion processes are there. During flood time period, in the alluvial system, we have this lateral erosion. But it is not the case that whenever there will be climate, you will have this lateral erosion. So they are the incision process which have been recorded here. I mean, Sabarmati is one such example. This incised river is because of the monsoon intensification is the 10,000 year tax. There is no tectonics here.
Okay.
Just back of this. Second thing is that it is not only this, because the process is a function of driving force and resisting force. So we don't have to forget about the resisting force, which is the sediment supply, QS, and then the grain size. I will write the D50. Some of the places we also use the D90. So if your sediment supply will change, then also the process will be different. In the initial slide, I have shown the example of the Pratt et al. Paper of that geology paper. So what happens that again the climate change. Initially the valley got incised in the Marsandi Valley. So it was the in-season, but then it got aggraded because of the sediment supply in the system, and it again got incised because of the no sediment supply in the system. So So last two episodes were related with the sediment supply. Because discharge was fixed, monsoon has already, so at the 10,000 year period, monsoon has enhanced and then it was stabilized. But after that event, thus, which we call as the nonlinear impact, that was coming because of the sediment supply things are there. So you have both the things may be constant, and if your sediment supply will change, you have those systems. There's also an example from Australia where at the time of this major urban expansion, they cut number of trees. No, sorry, trees were there in the channel, and most of the channels have very low energy because it is a passive tectonic setting. And in this kite, for the urban setup, they have removed all the logs. When the logs were removed, then the roughness will decrease. So nothing has changed, no water has changed, no sediment has changed. This is like a few 100 years old story, not 1,000. But the process same, only the roughness got changed. And once the roughness got changed, then the same channel had got this kind of channel. There was an incision all the way, bed as well as bank, because in the driving force, as I mentioned, that only the sediment supply is not the case, roughness is also important. So if you will change the roughness of the system and no flux will change, no slope will change, then also the process will change. So everything is that the whole box is the driving force and resisting force, and any one particular value will change, then the whole system will change.
Okay.
Any other question? So, and there are two studies, only two papers are there where they have also estimated the role of roughness, and we suggest that actually 90 to 95% of the steam power.
I have one question. Most of the time when we calculate this driving force, we consider discharge, and that is water discharge.
Discharge and water discharge.
No, what is that? That Q term is water discharge now, right? So the problem is then when we look into the finer cases, then we realize that it's not water, it's sediment to water ratio. Because ultimately, if I increase the water or I decrease the water, both of the cases can result in incision. Whether I increase or decrease, both can result in incision. It depends on sediment to water ratio. Now, so is there any work specifically which addresses this particular issue?
Yeah.
Where,
So what you are saying is the same thing. It is ultimately it is the ratio of these two things are there. So in both the cases, it is a ratio. Because discharge has increased, again, if we take example of the Marchandi River, discharge has increased. So higher discharge was there in all the systems. So all the three kind of things. In first case, this ratio was more Q by QS because only discharge has increased. But once the sediment has increased in the system, then the ratio got decreased. You have the deposition. And then once the sediment got stabilized because of the vegetation growth on the hill slope, then again this ratio has changed. So either you say the individual discharge and sediment supply relationship, or you talk as a ratio. There paper where people have used the ratios as well. They, in fact, earlier 70s, there are paper by Schum, where he talked about this impact of land use land cover, and he was using the sediment concentration rather than the sediment area. Concentration is nothing but the ratio. So it all depends on our, the process same, is that how do we play with those parameters, but the parameters are same. And many times in geological literature, we ignore the roughness values are there. But if you are working in the smaller time scale, when you know the roughness parameter, and in general Manning's N is used for this part, and flume-based experiments, and then some of the gravel-based, river-based experiment in UK, which is suggested that 90 to 95% of steam power actually goes against the roughness. The sediment transport erosion is only by 5 to 10% of the power. So roughness has a more important role to play, but we don't have the data. So when we do the modeling at the past processes, we ignore that part. But okay, so related to these things are there, then many times you will see that whatever you are doing the modeling, because this is a workshop on the quantitative geomorphology, and people say that all the models are wrong because there's nothing. So no model can include all the processes, all the natural processes are there. But we work on that part because these are the best thing available for the system. So when you're working with the model, we will encourage to go towards the quantification. But believing the model output with a closed eye, it is not advisable. So roughness is just one of the example is there that the whole thing we talk about the fluxes, water and sediment, actually roughness has much bigger role to play. And when people work on the modern day process, so that's where the roughness is considered in a bigger way. And every model has all the limitations. Okay, so maybe yeah, I will try to finish some of the part. So this is about the grain size, things are there. Then second thing, if we move up to the scale, then the reach scale process, the rivers are characterized by the different kind of channel patterns. These are some of the names, all of you are very well aware about those names. I will not go, so the things which I would like to highlight is that part, this changes in channel patterns in the alluvial river, it is of the continuum process. It means that one kind of channel pattern may change to another kind of channel pattern, which is fine. But the important thing in the geomorphology is that the change occurs in threshold. So if the system is, like in this plot, this is the slope, this is discharge. If you increase the slope from this point to this point or the discharge from this point to this point, there will be no such major changes there. Whereas the, maybe I will slow this part. This is one such example where slope and discharge has been put together as a power, which is a function of the product. And then on the x-axis we have the bed load. So three different parameters are there, and which is showing that if you change these parameters, you will get a different kind of river system. But the important thing is the threshold lines. And the example is that the same kind of change, if the system is close to here, if you're having this much of steam power and this much of sediment load, if you change the power and sediment supply, it will remain within the meandering system. Whereas in this case, this is also a meandering system, but same kind of change may bring the very different kind of systems are there. That's also, so that's how the threshold brings the non-linearity in the system. You have the same kind of cause, but the effects are very different. And that will define the sensitivity of the landform, resilient of the landform, all these things are there, people model. But the basic things are here that how to work it out. So to work it out, you have to understand that where the steam power values are there and what is the steam power values of the functions are there. You have to estimate or compute those powers. Very quickly I will go through is one of the example. This is one example of the Yamuna river in the Delhi area. I will, yeah, one or two things are there. So the Yamuna passes through the Delhi regions in this area, and it originates from the Lesser Himalaya. Delhi is a major urban conglomerate, and there are the number of dams are there. And because of the dams, this water generally decreases first. In general, water in a river system increases with respect to downstream, but here it decreases first and then only increases in this direction. And there is an equation of this part. So whenever we write equation, there must be a process relationship, there must be a sense of this equation. This equation doesn't have any sense of this part. It doesn't conveying anything about the processes because it is because this the variability of the discharge is governed by the many other parameters which are not related with the natural parameters. And in general, the power relationship I have written this part. So what happens in this system because of this? This is the geomorphic map which is showing the different river is divided into different reaches, and then this all the mapping and all these things are there. Thus, yeah, this is the work which I will, yeah, this is the figure I will discuss in this regard. So what happens then, this is the distribution of a stream power, this is the distribution of the unit stream power are there. So again, the slope, discharge and channel width have been measured, and then all the points have been done. And these bars are indicating the presence of channel bars in the system. And channel bars are an important part for the river health estimation. It was a modern day process study. And so on the x-axis, we have a specific stream power and specific pattern. On the this y-axis, we have the channel bar area, and these colors indicating the different kinds of bars. So when the river is moving from the mountain front to the, this is the Delhi regions, and so up to this area, the amount of bar has more because steam power has decreased, and this is explainable. When your steam power will decrease, deposition process will increase, and you have the bar. But here you have a very low steam power and also the very low percentage of steam power, so it will not explain that process. And in this case, the steam power is increasing, but the bar area is also increasing in the system. Again, it is not explaining the things. So some of the places it is explained, some of the places it doesn't explain. And the reason is that because in this part, the amount of steam power is very low and amount of sediment at this reach is also very less. So there is no sediment supply is there because of this number of dams in the system. If we take this, this is the y-axis, we have a total sediment load, and you can see there is almost zero sediments are there. So when there is no sediment, even though you will have low steam power values, you will not have any depositional feature because for deposition you will need sediment. So this is the things are there that many times the steam power will not be able to explain because there are some external controls are there, which are the anthropogenic controls which are there. And in this system, these values are increasing because not only the discharge values increases, but the sediment supply increases 7 times in this part. And again, the ratio things are there because the ratio of discharge of sediment is more in this part. I mean, the ratio of the sediment supply is more in this part. We will have the deposition in the system. So this is one such way which has been used to apply the steam power to understand the variability in the channel processes. And so wherever the system is natural, it is easier to, it is easier to define this relationship between the steam power and the channel process, but in the other set it is not there. And in this regard, I will also highlight this one new concept in 2010. Huang and Nelson has given the concept of the maximum flow efficiency. And what they suggested that all the processes in the river reaches is governed by this particular ratio. And he has defined this ratio, and then it is based on the hydraulic relationship. There's a lots of derivations are there, that the efficiency is given that whatever for a given amount of steam power, how much sediment may be transported. So this omega value is a fix. It is the available steam power in the system, but the sediment transport capacity of the river may be different in this thing, and that he has defined as the efficiency. And Huang and Nelson has suggested that every channel wants to enhance its efficiency, and that's how the channel process will be different. This is a very clear, will show that this dotted line is the steam power, which was not able to explain everything, but the efficiency curve is this, which is the ratio of this part, and which is showing that wherever the efficiency is decreasing, you have the lower sediment transport, and in this part, wherever the efficiency is increasing, you have the higher sediment transport is there. So again, it's your term that the ratio, not only the discharge of this part, but ratio of the steam power and then sediment supply provides a better explanation, because in steam power you have also taken the slope value. So you have taken all these 3 values are there. So this is once I will leave this part because it is the connectivity issue, but not much of sediment. Then I will move on the basin scale is there. Basin scale is so I start with the grain scale, then reach scale process, the diversity. Then at the basin scale, the major problem is that how to define the distribution of steam power. We know that along the profile or from upstream to downstream will be moved, then discharge usually increases, slope usually decreases in the system, and the other parameter width and depth will also increase because that's a function of discharge. So what will be the distribution of steam power in the thing, because this is a product of these two. So to work it out, this Knighton paper is a landmark paper in this area, and what is suggested that use the steam power as a function of gamma into A and S. A has been defined as a gamma into Q into S. So Q is been defined as a function of area as a power relationship of this part, and S is defined as a simple equation alpha e to the power minus beta L. So L maybe I think यहाँ पे होगा slide. So these are some of the authors are there. So here maybe this slide is there. So this is discharge has been represented as a function of the length, because discharge is governed by the power relationship of the area, and from the Heck's law we know that channel length is also a function of the area. So both of these equations you can club, you will get the equation as discharge as a function of the length. So you can write this values as the L value in terms of the length, and the slope is defined as an exponential curve, and which is this, so hk e to the power minus beta L. So you can write any coefficient, so alpha e to the minus beta L is there. Beta define the concavity of the functions, that how fast or the decay rate is there of this curve, and alpha is then what is the original value or the maximum elevation are there. If you can make a product of these two, gamma, and then make a derivative, because you would like to know that where the value will be maximum minimum, you take a simple derivative of a d omega by dl, and all these values you derive and put it equal to 0, because wherever the value will be maximum or minimum, you will have this derivative value will be 0. So if you will solve this equation, I don't have time, but what you will do that you will solve this equation first this part if you will do. So it will come as the A, B, and a L to the power b minus 1. This value we will keep it same, and plus now, so gamma I have taken outside because this is a constant, and this a L to the power b I have kept it the same, and this will become alpha minus beta and e to the power minus beta L. This is a simple derivation. This is simple derivative with respect to dl. So if I take the d by dl, then this expression will become like this. And if I take this gamma values are out, this value is also taken out, a L to the power b, and then whatever the function is there taken out, alpha e to the power minus beta L. We'll say that whatever is left is b value has been left out because I have taken this values out, and this L to the power b minus 1, I have taken out L to the power b, so 1 by b will be left out. This whole thing I have taken out, it has become plus. This value I have taken out, so whatever is left is the minus beta. And this I have put equal to the 0. So the whole thing will become 0 because these two products are equal to 0, and so yeah, 1 by L. So whatever we get, b by L minus beta is equal to 0, or in other words, L equal to b by beta, or this L is nothing but the L where the maximum values of the omega is there. It means there exists a point in the system, in a reverse system, which will be defined by the value of b and omega. What is b? B is that how fast this discharge value increases with respect to distance. B is the power expenditure there. It means the hydraulic characteristics actually defines that where this b value or where this maximum value of L will happen. And then what is beta? Beta is the decay curve. And the decay curve or the shape of the profile is governed by the geological condition of the system. Whether the tectonics, lithology, all these things are there. That is the whole evolution profile is there. So in general, it is the climatic condition or the hydrological response of the basin, and the geological condition actually defines this distribution of the curve, and we can give this curve using this kind of equation. So this equation suggests that, which is there from the 99 paper, that there exists regions where the peak will lie, and we will expect most of the erosion process or sediment transport process in the midstream part, and less process in the downstream and less process at the upstream region. So that has provided the explanation, and it was widely cited. And but one thing is that this expression was not being able to get the the author was not able to get the expression of these kind of large curve on the landscape, because in the landscape we all know that most of the erosion happens in the upstream area. So so this is the problem, that geomorphic expression was the problem, and in the field data, this constant 2003 they have. So this is the figure from the constant 2003. These are the dotted lines, dotted points are the observed points, and this is the profile points are there. So what they find out that in reality the observations are quite random. There is no such pattern in the system. So what had happened, and so what the Knighton's work has done, that they have approximated, this is the profile of the river, and they have approximated the exponential curve in this part. So exponential curve actually missing the steeper part of the curve, and that's why they may be able to miss the these higher values of the stream power in the distribution, because these equations are then important because people have started looking at the basin scale process so that they can work on the basin scale processes, and these equations can be directly used in the other models. So this is the one of our work which we find out that if we fit a simple exponential curve, it will not fit well, but if we club two exponential curve and then fit it in this direction, it fits well in the system. If we further broken down this curve into different parts, then it will fit well, but looking for this Descent cutting. So if we are moving from this figure to this figure and other figure, there is no major change in the error in the fitting values. So using the summation of two exponential curves provide the required data set is there. So rather than using the single exponential curve, it is better to use the two exponential curve. This will provide these results, and the equations can be worked it out. And so what we find out that when you work using both the equations, then you get this kind of profile in the system. So you get an upstream peak in the system, and then somewhere in the downstream you will get these things. And if you measure the slope at the different reaches, you will also get the variabilities in the path, because system, in the nature system, it doesn't behave like a smooth fashion. This dotted line is the first order. It is the basic, the plot of steam power on the basis of the Knighton's work are there. So in the nature, you will have lots of variability in the system, but in the basin scale, you can model some of the processes. So this is the steam power distribution pattern of one of the river in the Australia, and which is showing the upstream peak, and the second peak is the midstream. Whereas the earlier approach, where only the single order stream was there, it was showing only this midstream peaks are there. Then comes that, is there any geomorphic expression of this part, even though it provides a better explanation of the upstream regions. So this control point I will leave. I think in one of the talks, Sonam will discuss with more detail. But here I will figure, and then I will try to summarize those things. These are the, so red colors are the steam power distribution pattern at the longer time scale. Sorry, at the basin scale, where we have used the exponential equation of the summation of the exponential equation, and where it is written as a second order. And you can see that upstream peak is lying everywhere. And in nature, we may not be able to see all the peaks, because the green line indicates these are the simulated profiles, but this length may not be occurring all along the river system. So the green actually arrow indicates that this is the length of the natural river systems. So in the some of the river, like here, you can see that a small peak is there, and then you have a bigger peak in the system, and the river length actually ends here. This is a confluence point for this river. So so the distribution of the steam power in the river may not be exactly related to the whatever the simulated results are there, because in nature there is a limitation of this river length itself. But the main important thing is the what is the geomorphic expression, and the major landscape characterization or major landscape change in the system is, it is the initiation of the floodplain. So your bedrock system start taking in the floodplain deposition system. In the modeling results also, you have seen your detachment limited and transport limiteds are very different. In the fluvial geomorphology also, you see that here the erosion dominated system is changing into a changing with the initiation of the deposition pattern, which will further move towards the deposition dominated system in the part, and it's a major landscape change out there. And to plot these things, we have find out that all this initiation of these things are occurring after the first peak. So wherever the trough is there, this initiation of the floodplains are there, and this is the curve. So this was the earlier curve, and these white lines are actually indicating the initiation of the floodplain, or in other words, it is showing the geomorphic expression of the steam power distribution pattern, which support that, okay, we can construct a steam power distribution pattern at the basin scale, which will help us to understand the major landscape transition in the system, and it can be achieved. So all these things are there. You can see that the floodplain initiation is coming in the trough. So first peak is responsible for the sediment erosion, sediment supply, and then where this sediment, this trough is occurring, we have started getting the deposition in the system, and that's where this floodplain occurrence has started. So I have shown you the 3 examples. At the reach scale, again, some of the erosional features and depositional features are there. So wherever steam power values are higher, we get the erosion dominated features, and we get the depositional dominated feature, which are marked with the white color thing. Again, there is no such well-defined things that you can define a threshold, that if the steam power will be more than or less than this value, but it is a trend which is important, and that's why, because the roughness is also very important parameter which takes place. So to summarize all this part, what I said, that steam power can provide you an answer at different scales or processes of different scale, from grain size to reach scale. Even at the bedform scale, like ripples and dune, people have used the steam power, unit steam power, to explain the variability in the system. And just for the time, I have removed this part. So from grain scale to bedform to reach scale to the basin scale, it provides you some of the understanding, and it has a potential to be used as this part thing. And this is the last thing I would like to say, that it has also potential to explain the future of those things, because in the earlier thing I told that if we can work out the steam power and threshold condition, then if the system is close, so if the system is close to threshold, it means that it will be sensitive for the change, and if the system is away from the threshold, then it will be resilient for the changes. And if the things I have shown, that if we make a change in water and sediment, But if the system is away from threshold, then whatever change will happen, no major change will happen on the system. And that's the, actually equation is defined long time back by Boole in 79. Yeah, in terms of threshold aggregation things are there. But now there is a need to quantify, and this stream power approach provides one such solution or a tool to quantify the sensitivity of the river landforms. Nowadays, when there is so much talk about the climate change, human disturbance, then the major question occurs that what is the future of the river system, how sensitive are the river, and these kind of things will tell that every river will be sensitive, or the sensitivity of the river may vary from one river to another river, or it may also vary from reach scale to another reach. There is also a paper in 1990 by Brunson which he has defined about the geomorphic sensitivity and then what are the controls are there. So, so this is all about these things are there. When the system is close to threshold, then that will be highly sensitive. Last 3-4 slides I will say. This is the basin scale erosion mapping of the Himalaya. It is based on the geochemical data, and on the basis of geochemical data, the rate of erosion has been done. But there is no such physical expression that how can we quantify this part. So, and this is another work from the Andes where the CRN erosion rate has been compared with the mean catchment specific stream power SSP values, and it is showing the linear things are there. So, to work with the CRN data set, there's a limitation. You cannot work for the number of data set, but you can generate few of the data set, and then you can use the stream power to understand that what is happening in the basin area in terms of the erosion process. This kind of approach has been done. This is the example of the Yamuna River, where this CRN data has been used, and then people have related with the specific stream power values are there, that how much you have to match this part. And this is one such erosion rate and specific stream power values, some of the relationships are there. And it is not a linear relationship, there are some of the controls are there. Last, this is again, I will say that one of the major erosion process, or maybe, so there is a, because of the one of the major deposition process, there is a dynamics of the river system, and to understand the dynamics or to work it out the dynamics, we have to understand the erosion processes in these areas are there. So this is the work done by Rahul, and the aim is that not only to work at the spatial scale or along the profile, but also goes at the network scale in the system. So, and that's where this hydrological model, which is a semi-quantitative in nature, SWAT model has been used, and this is the calibration and the validation of the part is there. It means that the discharge data has been validated at the basin scale, and these are the plots which is showing. This is the stream power plots at the basin scale, the plots has been generated. You can see that the stream power values, lower values in the Tibet area, the stream power values are very low, and in this part, in the higher Himalaya region, the stream power values are higher. So whatever sediment is reaching in this part, most of the sediment is reaching from this kind of terrain, and then you can further quantify that which of the sub-basin is contributing most of the sediments. So around 50% of the basin area is not contributing to sediment in this part. A simple analysis can provide you this kind of thing. Putting this thing on the geological map to see that what is the role of geology, and this is the sediment erosion map is part. This is the main figure, that if you can work this concept using the hydrological data set, you will not only be able to model the system at the different spatial scales. So now from the longitudinal profile, you have moved up to the drainage network scale, but within the drainage network, you can work out at the different time zone. You can see that how the different monsoon period, non-monsoon period, the variability in the stream power is there. So this is the new set of paper which has bring that we can also map the stream power distribution pattern at the different spatial and temporal scale. Earlier I have shown you the example of the different spatial scale, and now this new methodology has also suggests that you can also measure at different temporal scale and look for the seasonal variation in the system, which will help you to understand the sediment dynamics and erosion process. Because especially in the Himalayan river or in the Indian condition where the monsoon is a dominant system, your 90 to 95% of the sediment transportation occur only during the monsoon period. So the average values will not be important. It is the monsoon period which will be more important. So I will stop it here, only to highlight that all these equations you have already gone through that part, and only to highlight this part, the stream power has also the potential to go in the past, to look for the processes in past. You have already in last 3-4 days you have already worked on those equations. So moving from a different spatial scale and moving from different temporal scale. This stream power has a very important tool, and it has been used as a number of tools are there. So some of these things are there. I will, I think, stop it here. So this is the conclusion: is that steam power has this potential. It can help to understand the geomorphic cause and effect, which is the major research question nowadays. So major research question is that you have to move across the scale, and you need some of the parameter which will help you to move across the scale are there. Methodologies are already there, and then you can move around with this part. Okay, thank you. So we will also have one demo session on the and the hands-on session maybe tomorrow. Yes. So we will check the schedule, and then we will work some of those parameters. So yeah, any questions? Then after
So I found that to estimate the sediment load transport, the critical stream power, the WC, will play an important role. So what is the approach to estimate that WC?
So both are important. Omega and omega C both are there, but omega C is a problem.
Uh,
So,
So we
people
will
take
consider,
the omega C value based on D50. I will highlight the problem. One is the grain size problems are there. Because in the system you have different grain size, and also it depends on what is the nature of imbrication in the system. So if the grain is already imbricated, like half of the grain have been imbricated, you need more amount of the steam power. The flume-based data set is suggested actually it is 2 to 3 times of the omega C value. So we take a single grain and apply the water force, whatever omega C value is coming, and if we have a grain of, a group of grains in the system of the same grain size, we will need 2 to 3 times of the omega C value. So there is all the sets of problems are there. There is no solution.
so we need to collect those information from the field.
We have to collect all the information in the field. People use the omega C value which have been derived from the flume experiment. There are also some of the paper where from the Badlo River, they have done some good observation, very high resolution observations, which have been used to derive the omega C values. So papers are there. In early 2000, there are few papers which has talked about the omega C values. People are using those. So, so that depends. When you are doing the modeling, there are a number of processes.
Yes.
One thing is the discharge. I mean, we know that climate has changed many times in that period, but we work out of this thing. Omega C is also one of this. Yeah. And that is why this grain size and landscape evolution has now the thematic areas. Yeah. Because people are playing with the omega C.
Yeah.
They know that how the grain size change will affect the whole set of evolution patterns.
Thank you.
So yes, in this assumption channel slope has considered same. Even though during flood time period the channel slope will be more, but there is no data set for it.
Right. So only if we assume the channel conditions are stable, then we can use different monsoon, non-monsoon data and get the different stream power.
So the bed slope was considered same, which is fine, but main thing is the energy slope, which will define that energy slope. Yeah, channel width is fine. Wherever we have the cross section, you know that channel width are there. So unit stream power values during monsoon period were estimated on the basis of channel width. You can fill the water. The HACRAS provide all the answers. But the energy slope, there is no data set. But at least it's provide that during non-monsoon period, if the values is here, it shoots up to this region. If if this value remains around this point, it will not that much of the importance. You can play with this number.
So some of the parameters you're getting from HACRAS.
Some of the parameters in this process, we have not used the HACRAS, but yeah, in some other studies, the HACRAS is.
Hello, sir. You showed this Cauchy avulsion map, and then you showed changing stream power with time. So were you able to find any avulsion processes related to change in stream power?
No. So the aim of the Cauchy map or the stream power map is to look for the spatial variability in the system. So avulsion map will come on the what is the temporal variability in sediment supply. So right now we are not talking about this temporal variability in the sediment supply, because There's no such major variability in the system. You will say that there is a zigzag pattern, but overall average sediment supply is higher. It is higher than the transport capacity, and that's why channel has been silted up. That is the known thing. The thing is that where from the sediments are coming. Is it possible that we can zoom the areas where from these are coming? What are the major tributaries are there? So that some of the hill slope treatment and other method may be applied. So this were to look for the spatial variability in the surface.
Any other question?
Okay. So if there's no question, then we can take that.
So I have a question.
Yeah, please.
So if omega and shear stress are what is this specific stream power and the shear stress has a one-to-one correlation, at least empirically. At least in hydraulic sense, if it has a one-to-one correlation, if velocity kept constant, velocity may vary, but if this longitudinal velocity kept constant, there is a one-to-one relation between this specific stream power and this shear stress. So can there be a relationship between this critical specific stream power that is needed to move the grains or move the bed load, and the shield stress that we talk about to move the bed load? So can there be a relation between them?
A relationship may be derived, but there is a big if about the velocity, assumption about the velocity constant, because we know that the roughness changes when we move from upstream to downstream. And because of grain size, because of the bed load perturbation, because of the vegetation growth in the system. So the roughness will be different even though we have the same amount of discharge, then the velocity will be different. And then by considering some of the assumptions, people have worked on the omega C values and these tau C values. But why are you interested in this?
These two correlation, the question that I asked is because the shield stress formulation, it's also an empirical formulation, but at least we have this Reynolds number which captures if there is any viscosity in the system, it captures if there is any eddy currents or some sort of that thing. It's not necessary that we have to assume a laminar flow throughout the system. If it's a turbulent flow, at least for some phases of our longitudinal stream, then this shield stress has the capability to capture those things through the Reynolds number. But the empirical relationship that we have for critical unit stream power does not bear the signature of any capability to capture this turbulence of flow. So that's why I asked that should we include this Reynolds number from in the critical specific stream power?
So in most of the literature, you will not found this significance of Reynolds number because all flows are the turbulent flow. There's no laminar flow in nature. Laminar flow only exists in the flume, and it's only that where the Reynolds numbers are already there in tens of thousands value, and then those kind of variations. First thing is there is no data about the Reynolds number for the natural system, and even if you measure, then what kind of variations are there? So the Shields curves have been used in the flume experiment to understand the sediment transport problem, and then one goes in the natural system, then you then assume many things and work out. So this omega C and tau C relationship will not help that much in the natural system because there is no such laminar flow. All the processes are happening in the terminal condition.
Thank you, sir.
Any other question?
Oh, we have tea and snacks outside. So.
Okay.